Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. So we're still continuing our Memorial Day focus here on Big Blend Radio, and we have a friend from the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association joining us. We do shows, we call them IFTWA, every second Tuesday, Friday, and third Monday. And today we have Kris Grant joining us. She's a travel editor of Coronado Magazine, and Coronado is in San Diego, California, and San Diego, the county, is full of military history, active military as well. So a lot of military bases. So she's joining us to talk about that. Actually, we're going to go on a little military road trip, military history road trip. We're going from Coronado to Corning, New York, upstate New York, where she is right now. And apparently she spends half her time in Coronado, half her time there now. And it's all thanks to the IFTWA conference last year that was upstate New York. So welcome to the show, Kris. How are you?
I'm terrific. And you have saved me from scrubbing floors of my new old home, my circa 1900 Victorian here in Corning that I stumbled across when I was at the IFTWA conference last September. We were walking to dinner. I went by a real estate office and saw these old Victorian homes in the window. And the next morning I was looking at them, and here I am. So I still have my house in Coronado, and I've got this Victorian here, and I plan to spend summers here and winters in Coronado.
Well,
Yay.
that's smart.
Yeah.
That's really smart. But I know we're going to touch on a few places, definitely Corning area. I know that it actually does tie back to Coronado, some of the history, especially when we look about one of the first naval aviators, Glenn Curtis. We'll touch on him. I know you've been recently to the Wright Museum. You've been to also the Air Force Museum in Dayton. So we got some things to talk about, but let's start at Coronado, because it is an actual island in San Diego, right? That this bridge is iconic to get there, right?
Yes. Actually, it is a peninsula, but everybody calls it Coronado Island. It is attached to mainland San Diego if you drive about 15 miles south and go through Imperial Beach. But everybody goes over the Coronado Bridge. It's a 1.4-mile bridge that comes out very close to downtown San Diego. And the bridge just celebrated its about 37 years old. But let me take you back to the 1800s. The only residents of Coronado at that time were jackrabbits and a bunch of sagebrush. And along come these two very wealthy guys from the Midwest, Chicago, Elijah Babcock and Hampton Story. And he had founded a piano company. That's where he made his money, Story and Clark Pianos. So in 1885, they purchased all of Coronado. It was actually two islands, North Island and South Island. They purchased it all for $110,000. And then they set up something called the Coronado Beach Company. 3 years later, their Hotel del Coronado, the resort hotel with lighting by Thomas Edison, opened. And then along comes kind of a depression, and so they were running out of money. Enter John Spreckles, and he came down from San Francisco, literally on his yacht, the Lurleen, and decided to invest in Coronado. By 1894, he had bought out Hampton and Story. And so, he not only owned Coronado, he owned the streetcar system in San Diego, the water company, and everything. In 1911, well, it was actually even a little bit earlier, he started leasing North Island, which is actually even larger than South Island, which South Island is basically Coronado. North Island is today Naval Air Station North Island. People think it's in San Diego, but it is in the city of Coronado. And so he started leasing the land for like $1 a year. And meanwhile, back here on the East Coast, or near the East Coast, up here in Hammondsport near Corning, Glenn Curtis started with bicycles, proceeded to motorcycles, and then started doing airplanes. At the same time, the Wright brothers are down in Dayton, Ohio. That's where they based most of their operations, although they went over to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, to where it was windy. And that's where they recorded in 1903 very first recorded air flight around. So they wanted to make money. Both Curtiss and the Wright brothers are, looking for customers. Well, who buys airplanes? The Navy and the Army. And so they looked to the military. About 1910, 1911, Wilbur was over at the Paris Air Show, and Orville goes down to Fort Myers, Florida, and he starts doing a contract with one military base. And Glenn Curtiss heads out to California and to North Island and sets up the first training school for naval aviators. And that is why Coronado is called the birthplace of naval aviation, because the first naval aviators started training there under Glenn Curtiss in 1911. So that was the kind of the birth of North Island Naval Air Station. And then it got a boost in 1915. San Diego held the Panama American Exposition in Balboa Park. And that was largely organized by John Spreckles. In fact, the guy who was the president of the Chamber of Commerce lived at his Hotel Del, I forget his name, but and that's when John Spreckles built the Organ Pavilion for Balboa Park, and they built all of the buildings in Balboa Park. And they kind of made it a show place. It was kind of like a World's Fair. And the reason they did it in 1915 was that was the opening of the Panama Canal. And John Spreckles, who also, in addition to being in sugar, owned a sea cargo line that went from Hawaii to Australia, he realized that San Diego was the very first port that ships coming through the Panama Canal would be coming to. So they had the Panama American Exposition, and one of the people who attended that and went on a tour over at Coronado and North Island was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was Secretary of the Navy. Years later, when Roosevelt was president, that's when the federal government officially acquired Naval Air Station North Island. They purchased all of North Island. World War II was coming up. And during World War II, NASNY became the largest naval industrial complex in the world. And it's just, during World War II, the town just, so many people moved to town. And then it also was the home of aircraft carriers at the time. Some of the famous ones were the USS Lexington, USS Saratoga. And it was also, it wasn't the home port, but the USS Enterprise, which was the first nuclear aircraft carrier sometime there in 1961. Today, Coronado is home to 3 nuclear aircraft carriers, the USS Carl Vinson, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and the USS Abraham Lincoln. So, and by the way, I've been out on some of these ships. I spent a weekend on the Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, wow.
About 20 years ago when it was a brand new ship. I was part of a city delegation. And I have to tell you, I am so impressed with our Navy. A couple of things that I was actually with the Tonight Show crew. That's when Jay Leno was hosting the Tonight Show. Now, Jay wasn't on board, but it was a lot of his cameramen and producers and stuff. And actually, I was rooming with his supervising producer, whose last name was also Grant, Stephanie Grant. But we toured the entire ship, the hangar bays where they do all the maintenance. And then we went up. First of all, we landed on the ship. Ship was about 150 miles off of San Diego. So we flew on a cog out there, which is an experience because we landed on the flight deck, catching the tail hook. And all I can say is 1 minute you're flying and the next minute you're stopped. In fact, they tell you to lean forward so that, how does it work? You're facing backwards. You're wearing something called cranials to protect your head. And they tell you to lean into your straps because of the force of the stop. Let's see. No, we were facing forward and you're leaning back so that you're not jerked back when the tail hits. And then when we left, we got catapulted off the ship, and we went up on the flight deck and watched from the side as they were basically slingshotting these jets into the air.
Wow.
Then we went one night. We watched night ops because they train around the clock. About 5,000 people on board, so it's like
Wow.
it's like a small city out there. During the night ops, one of the planes, as it came in, they were doing touch and goes. Touch the ship, but don't get the tail hook and then take off again, power up. And one of the ships damaged the tip of its wing. So I was so impressed because they just kept the guys flying around. They got the crew to walk shoulder and shoulder. They walked the entire flight deck and they picked up any screw, anything that had fallen off, any debris that was left. They put it in a plastic sack, and like 10 minutes later, it was up with us in the air boss. The next morning, I woke up and we went through the hangar bay, and that they were repairing that very ship. They had worked all night on it because, time doesn't stop on these things.
Mm-hmm.
So that it was as good as new. And then another guy was having a problem catching the tail hook. He had gone around twice and he missed it. And if he had missed it a third time, they were going to send him back to North Island to land on land. But he caught it that night.
No stress or anything.
He catches it, and it was pizza night on board. They make really good pizza. So he lands, and the first thing we hear up there is,
cool. Okay, wait a minute. They may be converting me to, a military career if there's pizza involved. That's my style right there. That's funny.
Another time I went out on I think it was the Decatur battleship, and I was out with a chef from Canada, of all places, a guy named Trevor. And they had this program with the Navy called Adopt a Chef. And so I was doing a story for the food section for the Union Tribune and I think that it was cooking in the Navy mess. And what I found out, and what makes perfect sense, is how important good quality food is to these guys. First of all, they're working really hard, so they get hungry, but it's also a piece of the culture to be able to look forward to a really good dinner. I mean,
kind of like firemen,
out at sea.
Firefighters.
You're out at sea. Yes. Yeah. So that became kind of fun. Let's see, what else shall I tell you a little bit about our Navy SEALs and how the SEALs are trained in Coronado?
And that's in Coronado too?
Yes. Navy SEALs have trained in Coronado since 1962. Before that, it was called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition Training. It was President John F. Kennedy who formally established the SEAL teams. SEALs, they go through 3 phases of training, and the first phase is 7 weeks, and that's basically general physical training, and then phase 2 is combat diving, and phase 3 is land warfare. But week 4 of phase 1 is Hell Week. Oh. Now that runs Sunday nights through Friday, and to give you an introduction to Hell Week, I remember.
I don't want to go to Hell Week.
But I thought I heard fireworks. And I went and I knocked, when I first moved to Coronado, and I went and I knocked on my neighbor's door. And I said, does the Hotel Del, are they having a fireworks show tonight? And they said, no, it's Hell Week. Every Sunday night about 9 o'clock, you would hear the fireworks, but they weren't fireworks. They were guns. and real bullets. And so these guys, during Hell Week, they're crawling on their bellies so they don't get shot. They do ocean swim. You'll sometimes see them running on the beach carrying boats above their head or logs. They'll do an obstacle course. And then I've seen pictures where they're arm in arm and they're sitting in the surf right where the waves will break, and they're facing the waves, and they're, like I said, they have their arms interlocked, and they'll be sitting like that for a long time where the waves are breaking over them, which it's kind of a little scary, I think. They get, for that entire duration of time, maybe 3.5 to 4 hours sleep. I mean, they run them ragged, and if they want out, they have to go and ring a bell 3 times.
So this is kind of like simulation of war.
Yes, it is. And, recruitment of Navy SEALs, we once had a speaker at our Rotary Club talking about what makes a good Navy SEAL. And the first thing they do is they look for people who, first of all, they're pretty young, but they look for people who are very comfortable in the water, maybe people who played water polo in high school or college. And probably the most important aspect is the word that they call team ability, the fact that they are not so into themselves individual, but they're comfortable working in a cooperative environment, because that can be life or death.
Yeah.
Now, for somebody who's interested in, it used to be up until 9/11, 2001, you could, they even had a car race at North Island, an annual car race. And with that, they'd have tours of aircraft carriers. It is very tight today. The only way you're going to get on base is if you are related to someone in the military, or someone takes you with them, and they have the military, because North Island is, I think they have 39 different commands. They have helicopter squadrons. They train people to fly helicopters there. But it's a city. I mean, there's a bowling alley, a movie theater, McDonald's, the commissaries, everything.
The bases are like, I lived in 29 Palms, and that's a whole other, I remember driving, home, like from San Diego, driving through Joshua Tree Park in the evening, and you come over this ridge and dip down into 29 Palms, and you can see not the city of 29 Palms, maybe a few twinkle lights, right? But you would see the base, and it was like a little Vegas. Like, I'm not joking. It was like, here's a military base, and they would do those maneuvers too, and you would shake. We're in the desert too, a little different, but you would physically, your house would shake. And we're going, like, I don't know anybody who lived out there that didn't have some kind of little bit of a crack in their walls. Seriously. And there were people with a lot of adobe buildings, historic adobe buildings out there. But it was very similar to those maneuvers. Like, and some of it would take your internet out. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, but they would do these huge maneuvers. It's pretty cool, to be kind of there and know.
When Prince Harry was training out at 29 Palms in helicopter flying, and he once came over to Coronado with his buddies because he wanted to go to McPee's, which McPee's Irish Pub was been around since about 1981. The guy who owned it at the time, founded it, a guy named Greg McPartland, was a former medic and Navy SEAL. So the SEALs, a lot of them hang out at McPee's. And so if like I said, you can't get onto the base, but if somebody is, so anyway, Harry came over, and there's a booth where he sat, and it's still marked at McPee's.
Harry's got his own booth.
If somebody is interested in learning more about the aircraft carriers and stuff, number one, I would recommend that they go to the USS Midway Museum, which is right across. It's near downtown. It's on the Embarcadero in San Diego. And a lot of the guys who work there, some of them even served on the Midway.
Yeah.
But, a lot of them are former Navy guys. You can also, go on harbor cruises that take you as close as you can get. And then every November in San Diego, they have Fleet Week, and they usually have one or two Navy ships that are open to tour, not the aircraft carriers, but maybe down at the 32nd Street Naval Base. You can maybe go on a battleship.
You're bringing back memories. You're bringing back memories for me of San Diego. We lived in San Diego and Vista just on the other side of Camp Pendleton, which also did kabooms at times. So you'd have these kabooms, and you're like, what's that? I remember once hearing kabooms, and we thought, what, are we getting bombed? And I didn't, if you don't know, it is kind of freaky, like you were talking about. It's the same, that feeling of what is going down. I remember when I lived in Florida off the Space Coast, and I just moved there. And I'm driving to work, and this is pre-magazine. I was really young and, naive, just fresh. I think I was maybe 19 or 20, just came out of South Africa. I had no clue where I was. I didn't even know how to count money in this country yet. And it's all the same, y'all. Like, I don't know. We need to have different, our currency needs to change. Not that we use cash that much, right? But I am driving to work, and I see everybody pulled over looking at the sky, and I'm like, what in the heck is happening? Like, I didn't know they were launching rockets and stuff out there. And apparently it was a big rocket event. I don't know what was being launched off there. It was probably
Oh
some
my
biggie.
goodness.
And I didn't know I was on the Space Coast and they were doing that. I mean, I just got off I'm not the boat, but
Yeah.
literally just got
Yeah.
there and I had no idea what I was doing. And I just thought it was the eeriest feeling because everything, like September 11th, everything went quiet on that day. Just everybody
Oh,
stopped. Remember that? It was
yeah.
quiet.
Yeah.
Everybody was just across the country. I know we were living in Julian in San Diego at the time, and I went to the post
Oh.
office and I hadn't seen any news yet or anything. And I'm like, what? It's that weird like feeling. And but that's what happened in the Space Coast and they're launching a rocket and I had no clue. And I just thought, what is this?
Oh.
Is a giant alien coming? It's coming from the
Oh.
sky. I
Oh.
thought it was coming down, not going up. So
Oh, that's
clueless.
crazy.
But that's
Yeah.
that's the thing about military bases. They do stuff. And if you don't have the intel, man, you have no clue what's going on until you now I'm way more savvy about military bases across the country. But man, they are like cities, but you're really taking me home to San Diego. I used to walk down the whole area by the Midway and all of that. I mean, San Diego's military
Mm-hmm.
history is intense, like you're saying. And I remember Fleet Week was a big deal across the county. Everybody celebrated
Mm-hmm.
Fleet Week with all kinds of events. So
Oh,
San
and there's
Diego is
one more
very patriotic.
along that line. 4th of July, the 4th is huge in Coronado. It
Hmm.
starts with the Independence Day parade. It's the parade kicks off at 10 o'clock. People arrive. I mean, if you're going to come over, you've got to get there like at 4 or 5 in the morning, because at 5 o'clock, we have a very wide median strip that goes down Orange Avenue, and people set up lawn chairs and everything else on the median strip to watch the parade. The city doesn't allow anybody to go out until 5 a.m. and then it's like, boom, everybody's there. And so you want to get your stuff. Plus, your parking, if you don't get there early in the morning, it becomes very difficult to find parking. Maybe stay overnight somewhere, find a friend. But it's an excellent parade because we have a lot of Navy stuff that's in it. We have the CBs, and there's usually a flyover that starts off the parade. So that's one thing. And then a couple other museums that I recommend that aren't in Coronado, but across the country that relate to aviation and naval aviation. In Hammondsport, which is near Corning, Finger Lakes District, that's where Glenn Curtiss was born. And there's the Glenn Curtiss Museum, and it's an excellent museum. And it not only has some of his planes, but bicycles and motorcycles. And then in his later years, he even created some of the first RVs and what are called fifth wheels. And there's one or two of those on display. So the Curtiss Museum in Hammondsport. Then down in Dayton, you get a double whammy. You get the Orville and Wilbur Wright Museum, and you get the National Air Force Museum, which is fantastic. And you really have to have 2 days to go through there. Again, it starts from the earliest aviation with balloonists and remember the blimps and things like that. And then, of course, the Wright brothers and all. But it goes all the way up to the Minutemen Minutemen missiles. That's a very scary room, let me tell you.
That's a
Space
whole.
shuttle. And there are 4 Air Force Ones on display. There's Truman's, Eisenhower's, Kennedy's, and I think Franklin Delano Roosevelt's. And you can go in them. You can tour each one of them. The Kennedys is where they swore in Lyndon Baines Johnson as president.
That's right.
After the assassination. So, you have to schedule 2 days to go through that. And then, of course, down in Pensacola, Florida, there's the
I used to
Naval
live there too.
Aviation.
Yeah, I did. That was
Yeah.
after the Space Coast. I went to Pensacola, but that's a military city itself. Like just
Oh,
even
yeah.
when you think about the Spanish history as well. But yeah, so yeah,
Mhm.
did you go to any of the museums there, or what did you do in Pensacola?
In Pensacola, no, I think I was traveling. I was on my way to Laurel, Mississippi, which was fun. No, that was about the only thing I did in Pensacola on that visit was to tour the Navy Museum. And then, another area I went to, the darling little town, was Fairhope, Alabama, which has nothing to do with military history, but it was a cute little town.
It is.
But,
Alabama's cool. I mean, I think it gets left off of the tourism map sometimes, Alabama. I really do. I think, there's a lot of civil rights history. It's beautiful. The coast is beautiful. And it shares, history with Pensacola too. There's just there's a lot of history in that whole region on the coast and the Gulf shores and a lot of military history and all of that.
There's a little artsy town that I went through. I think it's called Orange City.
Orange. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's just orange.
I think it's just orange or orange. I know exactly. Yep. And I used to drive through there all the time, and I can even see it because you can go over the water on it. There's an extra.
You know what? What's interesting? What took me to Laurel, Mississippi, and then Wetumpka, Alabama, was that show. Aaron and Ben Napier. It's called Hometown, and they were from Laurel, Mississippi, and they've done a lot of home renovations. Laurel, Mississippi was originally a lumber town and a railroad town, so it had a lot of craftsman style homes. And they have been renovated. It's on HGTV and I don't know, maybe the Discovery Channel. And then they went over to Wetumpka, Alabama, and they had just had a tornado come through that town. And it's also where the movie Big Fish was filmed. And the gal who's the head of the Chamber of Commerce now lives in the Big Fish home. And that was one of the projects that the hometown takeover had redone. But Wetumpka was a darling little town in Alabama.
See, we've done full circle. It's all back to houses again. Here you are.
Well, I forgot. Thank you. Because Glenn Curtis's original home that he built in Coronado, right across from the Navy base, I'd say it was about 5 years ago, won an award for historic preservation in Coronado. And the house it's called an airplane house because in the middle of it, there's a second-story room that has windows on all sides. It's almost like a control tower. But yeah, so the Glenn Curtis home, which is right at 3rd and Alameda, right across from where he had his school, has been preserved and renovated.
That's amazing because the name Glenn Curtis, when I know Joe Clark, travel writer Joe Clark, and she has a podcast with us, but she went to the IFTWA conference. I know you guys met up there and she was talking about Glenn Curtis and I kept going, I don't know why I know this name. I mean, obviously I do a lot of podcasts, a lot of travel, so it's going to happen. It just, when you emailed saying, I want to do this show and talk about Glenn Curtis, I didn't know he was connected to Coronado and San Diego. So that's why, because Glenn Curtis is a name in San Diego.
Interesting?
Yeah.
Curtis and the Wright brothers were rivals. And the Wright brothers, friends with Curtis, I guess Ford did a little bit with the Wrights. But the Wright brothers were very secretive. They were afraid. And the Wright brothers developed this patent. It's a one-page patent that basically said they had the rights to any flying machine, basically, in the United States. And finally, the federal government said enough. Because every time Glenn Curtis or somebody else would try and create something, the Wright brothers would sue them. And when Wilbur Wright died, I think he had typhoid fever. Orville Wright blamed the stress of the lawsuit between Curtis and the Wrights with hastening his brother's death. That's how horrendous this was. And it's also one more thing about, and I don't think that's true. I just think he was grieving. The Wrights kept to themselves, and their sister was the bookkeeper, and they were, I don't know, they lived in fear that someone was going to steal their stuff. They were not as collaborative as I think Glenn Curtis was. So I think it's kind of sad. And neither one of them ever married, neither Wilbur or Orville. Now, Orville, he was the one who was piloting that 1903 flight that was the first recorded flight. And he didn't die until 1948. And you think of it, that here from 1903, the first flight, until he lived through World War II when we were dropping atom bombs from planes over Japan.
So he saw
I
what his
mean,
effects
that,
were. That's a really good point to
yeah,
make. I think we forget
yeah,
about that. We just think of them with, the black and white images we see of the planes, right? We just think of that and not how they saw how flights happened.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that would be very discouraging.
Yeah,
But
that part of it. It's amazing when you think about the history of flight, how it's changed how we travel the world, how things are more accessible, and then how now we have drones. Flight has changed into drones and changed photography. It's changed how we use ammunition and how we bomb people. I mean, I know that's not pleasant to talk about, but it's true,
I kind of wonder about naval aviators, and I don't know the answer to this. I should have asked when I was in Dayton at the Air Force Museum. But at what point do we not send men up in planes and we just have them pilot drones from the ground?
It's getting there. It's getting there. I
Yeah.
think it is because I saw a friend. There's like I got spring fever here. A little bit of pollen in the air today, but I have a friend who posted about um, a fighter pilot in Ukraine, and he got wounded, but still shot down 5 drones. And this is in Ukraine, like current, and then, a medal for it. And he posted this on his Facebook. I'm going to leave his name off, but I know you're listening, dude. I know. It caused a big war, man. People started just carrying on. He didn't deserve that. And I'm like, and my friend Mike, yeah, I'm just going to now drop out part of his name, but everyone knows he's been on our show for years on military history. And he's like, he shot down 5 drones that would have killed people. Like that is, and so people are having a weird thing about drones not being effective, yet they are, and we still have to go up there and get them because it's like we're getting there. It's weird. I mean, these drones are dropping bombs. They're not just, hey, I'm here to take your wedding photo and do a nice scenic view of the Coronado Bridge. I'm here to kill you, And we have interviewed a Top Gun fighter pilot. Oh, by the way, everyone, the Top Gun house is, if you want to talk about that, is up in Oceanside, California, from the movie Top Gun. If you want to go there for some military history, and Oceanside's it's very cool on all of that too. But
I've actually stayed at that hotel. It's a Hyatt.
Yeah.
Mission something Hyatt. And the Top Gun house is right in the middle of the hotel, and they serve these. It's sort of a bakery where you just kind of go in.
Yeah, they do pie there now. Yeah,
items.
they're pie. But it used to. Yeah. It wasn't part of the hotel like years ago when I was there. It was like the historical society. No. They've had to hold on to that house like you wouldn't believe. But now it's still open to the public, and Oceanside is also very patriotic. And the thing about
another thing I didn't. Speaking of Top Gun, and Coronado is Top Gun Maverick a lot of that was filmed at NASNY, and everybody said that Tom Cruise was just the nicest guy. And there's scenes where they're playing volleyball on the beach, and that's our city beach. But there have been so many films during World War II, John Wayne movies, and it just has a lot of the films that you will see from the few were actually that are up in the air were filmed at North Island.
That's really cool. I mean, that's San Diego, man. Yeah, I'm feeling a little homesick. I'm not gonna lie. And my good friends got married in Coronado, and I remember I think we went on the military because we had to check our IDs, and like when you go on a military base, they take your ID and all that kind of stuff. They got married. Oh boy, 20 years ago. Oh my gosh, maybe older than that. It was we had to be cleared to go or something. Maybe it wasn't military, but I know we had to be checked and have our ID in. I know that.
Well, one more thing that people might want to go to is there is a Coronado Island Film Festival, and this year is the 10th anniversary, and it's November 5th through the 8th. And they screen films at several locations throughout the city. And usually, always the last night, they show the signature film, Some Like It Hot, on the beach in front of the Hotel Del, where it was filmed in 1958.
Very cool.
And that's the one that starred Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and it was directed by Billy Wilder.
That's right.
And it's always
iconic.
rated high. It's like the AFI best comedy. It's just a darling film.
Well, before you go, and everyone, we're going to have all the links to Kris with the magazine and some of the places she's been to, articles she's written are in the episode notes. But before you go, is the Hotel del Coronado. It's an iconic hotel. I mean, this is just like a masterpiece, right? Mm-hmm. Is it haunted?
Well, they still say that the ghost of Kate Morgan, there's one room in the Victorian mansion. And, there have been some paranormal activities in that particular room. I can't recall the room number off the top, but the hotel has just completed, I think it was 20 years it took, maybe it was only 10, 10 or 20 years, 691 rooms to, I think they have about 1,100 rooms now. And they have undergrounded all the parking and brought back a lot of lawn areas. And then one of my favorite things is they have the rocking chairs out on the front. It's
lovely. Well, thank you so much. It's been really fun to have you on the show and kind of reminisce on San Diego and Coronado and Oceanside, and then talk about, those ties to Corning. So we did go from, Coronado to Corning. I think this was a cool little road trip and some great history. So I hope you enjoy cleaning your new Victorian home for the rest of the day.
Back on my hands and knees. Yeah. Lisa, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.